Away from closing arguments in Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial. The jury could potentially reach a verdict by the end of the week. Prosecutors will be trying to weave together weeks of testimony and evidence they say proves Trump falsified business records to help his 2016 presidential campaign. But regardless of the verdict, there's mixed reaction from Democrats on the impact this case will have on Trump's reelection chances.
Couldn't this give him a boost if he's acquitted?
You know, I don't really think so. I think, you know, Donald Trump's character is clear to the world.
I think the New York cases, if anything, may have backfired against those who thought that it would be the salvation. But I don't think the New York cases are exactly what Democrats were hoping they would be.
The broad centrist middle of the American people, I think, understand what he did and why it is so abhorrent. I'm already deeply disturbed that Donald Trump has succeeded in slow walking one or more of those cases.
So our panel is back now to talk about this. Obviously, the hush money trial has taken up a lot of this candidate's time and his focus. We've certainly been talking about it a lot in the media as we cover this election year and these campaigns. I'm curious how each of you think that any sort of verdict might impact the campaign moving forward. Lance, you want to start?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think Trump supporters are with him all the way. And look, I mean, the Trump campaign has been fighting a two-front battle here. As somebody who's done a presidential campaign, I can tell you one battle alone is enough. But I think they've done a pretty good job of it. If anything, they're going to be glad just to have this thing over so they can get focused on the general election again. But at the end of the day, I don't think that this is really going to impact his standing in the polls. Everybody knows, everybody's been following the trial. They know he's on trial. They know it's a New York judge. They know it's in New York City. So I'm not sure it's really going to happen.
Even if he becomes a convict?
Look, this is one of 4 cases, and everybody loves to talk about how this has sucked up the oxygen in all of traditional media. But people are not getting all their news from traditional media. They're getting it from bifurcated sources. They're getting it on their phones, streaming at their leisure. And this is where we stand to see a real divide in how this shakes up come this summer. I'm one of the people that tends to think a convicted felon status will ruin it for President Trump. For the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party, where he sits right now, is in a place of goodness. The minute a conviction comes down, I think it shakes up the RNC. I think we get closer to a brokered convention. I was a 2016 RNC delegate. I can tell you, we lost the fight to deny Trump the nomination on the floor that summer. But this is where things get dicey. Do they really want to put somebody forward on the ballot this fall that is a convicted felon? That shakes the American consciousness. Democrats will have a field day with that. I don't think they want to do it. So we need to start talking about a brokered convention.
Interesting. And Meghan, in terms of Rina just mentioned the Democrats, would they have a field day with a convict?
Look, I think that, yes, those are great talking points, and it just is going to fire up his base more regardless if he is convicted or not convicted. But those aren't the people that we need to be concerned about. We are concerned about the people, the 5% of voters that are not paying attention right now, that are the Nikki Haley voters or Black people and Latino people. Those are the people that we need to be talking to, and those are the people who are not paying attention right now. So I'm not sure it moves the needle a ton either way, but I think either way it's firing up the base, but those aren't the people who are going to win the election for him, and those are the folks that are going to care if he's convicted.
The part, though, about the base, the base has shrunk. We have the empirical evidence to back it up. MAGA is not as big as it used to be. And certainly the power is there, but in the short term. So I tend to believe that all this talk of it not moving the needle is us not really looking at the long game here. This is very serious, uncharted constitutional territory we are talking about. And the fact that we minimize it with certain segments of this demographic, I mean, there are really only 6 states in play that will be the swing this time, determining it. When you're looking at the Sun Belt and you see Trump being very competitive in places like Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, how's this going to shake down with all those voters? That's the part we need to see more focus on, and I'm not seeing it right now.
Okay, let's listen to Tim Scott. He was on over the weekend. Let's listen to what he said about a potential verdict.
Do you have faith that the jury is going to deliver a fair verdict?
Well, there's no crime, so I assume that they will actually find him innocent. The only person guilty in that courtroom is D.A. Bragg, guilty of corrupting the justice system, guilty of not doing his job, and guilty of trying to frame an innocent man. It's really the two-tier justice system that has so many Americans concerned about fairness in our country.
So he talks about a two-tier justice system, but at every turn, they have handled him carefully in the sense that they've tried to give him as much leeway as possible. The judge has warned him how many times about the gag order, and I don't want to put you in jail, but I might put you in jail. Still, though, Lance, do you think he can effectively, he being Trump, continue to make this argument that he's been targeted, and also to see somebody like Tim Scott coming to his aid right now?
I think the Trump campaign has done a phenomenal job in terms of their messaging, particularly when it comes to this judge who, whether it's $35 or 35 cents donated to his political opponent's campaign, his daughter is raising hundreds of millions of dollars for Democrats. And the one thing that they also did really well in the messaging front is they brought these surrogates out, right, to come stand with him to get around the gag order, to say the things that he cannot say. I think they've done a great job of messaging. That's why you look at these polls and he's leading, because there is a contingency of voters out there who are saying, look, he's not getting a fair shake. There is a two-tier justice system out there.
It is interesting, though. We didn't quite get to it, but Tim Scott also went on saying that he was saying, I've not seen video of them raiding Joe Biden's garage like they did Mar-a-Lago, but there is indeed video, and the president's home was searched by the FBI. So it is interesting to kind of see what the picture that they're trying to paint with all of this. Okay,